Sheep, goats, or pigs? We're gonna talk about them and why we picked one of them today. Hey guys, it's Josh with Heartway Farms. We are a family of 8 homesteading here in Illinois. Make sure you hit that subscribe button below there to support the channel. So when we first got our homestead, one of the things that we had to consider is what animals we wanted to have on the property. And we had all the animals to choose from, like you guys have options of pigs and sheep and goats and cattle and horses and donkeys and all those good things. But one of the things we took a breath and focused on was, what are we gonna be using our land for? What type of equipment do we have? And then what does our land itself need to make it more sustainable or usable, or just generally in a regenerative nature, what can we do to help augment what's currently going on? And one of the things we observed was the land itself had not been really used or farmed or tended to in many years prior to us taking it over. So when we purchased the land, it kind of sat dormant. It hadn't been really farmed or grazed or used for agricultural purposes in many years, especially the back part of the property that we're in now. And there was a lot of part of the property here, as far as acreage goes, that would be extremely usable, but it was just kind of like overtaken and left unattended to. And so we started the research of, what would be best for us to utilize? Would it be sheep or goats or pigs? And you can dive down like why they're all more beneficial and what they can all do. But we ended up landing on the Katahdin Hair Sheep. And the reason we did that were a couple things. Is one, we were newer to farming when it came to animals and animal husbandry. Number two, the amount of equipment that we had to get into it. We didn't have pickup trucks and animal livestock trailers and cattle chutes and all those types of things for larger animals. So we had to take in consideration what our qualifications were getting into it, what our needs were as far as what we wanted done, and then also what equipment or infrastructure do we have in place to get something on the property. So we started off with a flock of 12 Katahdin Hair Sheep. Katahdin Hair Sheep are a hair sheep, which means that you don't have to worry about shearing them for wool and stuff like that. So there's that part of the animal husbandry side of it that you don't have to tackle. There's also, as far as how they're kind of bred or how they work, they really kind of take care of themselves in a lot of ways. Because they're out on pasture moving around, their hooves kind of get wore down and you don't have to get after their hooves too much. They're naturally a little bit more parasite resistant than a lot of other goats or something like that. So there were just a lot of these things when it came to sheep that we landed on. And then the other thing that we got into was that sheep can do a lot of the same things as like maybe pigs can do. I honestly just don't enjoy pigs. I'd never really thought of like being a pig farmer or raising pigs for anything. We don't eat a lot of pork ourselves as a family. Not that we don't eat it at all, we just don't find like a lot of pleasure in it. So pigs kind of got checked off the list because we just didn't like have a passion about them. And the more I dug into the sheep, I realized that I could use them in kind of the same way as the pigs, as long as we knew how to utilize them and how long to keep them on the land. The point of it is that if you want the sheep to come in and graze the tops of something, you keep them on the land for a shorter amount of time. If you want them to really get in and just beat the land up and kind of reset it and really disturb the land, you leave them there for a longer amount of time. You kind of make them upset so that they have to do a little bit more foraging and a little bit more rooting up of some stuff. Not that they'll root into the ground like a pig, but they'll be a little bit less picky and they'll start eating. And then right at that point of where they're going to start pushing the fence line and they're going to start to kind of give you problems, you move them to a new spot. So they really do a good job of overly disturbing the land in the places that you want them to, or just being a good mobile mower of the land once you have it set up how you want to utilize the land. So I'm gonna take you around the property. I'm gonna show you how the sheep have disturbed the land in some places, how they have reset some of the invasive species and other growth, and how we've really lifted the understory of the property to where there was a lot of scrub and invasive species and things that were just not serving us a lot of benefit. And those sheep have come in there and they've completely changed the landscape. And I'm going to give you a direct compare and contrast on our property line and show you a place that they haven't been and that they haven't been managing, and then the difference between the managed side of it. So let's jump over here and check it out quick. All right, so over here is a great example right off the get-go. We have, over my shoulder here, we have on the property line, we have all of this elephant grass, is what we call it. I'm sure there's a specific name for it, but we call it elephant grass. It's the stuff that grows taller than elephants. It's really invasive, it spreads really quickly, and it takes over the landscape. And you can see right here how it's just thick. I mean, you could barely even get through it without getting, first of all, cut by the razors of the grass, but getting through it is just a bear. So it's super, super thick. And then over here in contrast is part of an island space, and even the place that I'm standing right here was totally full of this stuff. So the sheep have come in, and over the years, they've put it in check because they've eaten it at the baby stage before it's gone to seed, and they've allowed the native grasses to take over here. So this is one example of them getting in here to the thick of this here and freeing up the space here. So you've got the overgrown part here that's not being grazed and not being managed, and then next to it you've got the fence line here, and you've got the area that's being managed and grazed and used for forage for the animals. So that is one area right here, just alone in the open space here, not even getting into the understory of the forest itself or the silvopasture portion of the land, but this is right out in the open, right by our creek area. And you can see even here, I'm gonna pan over here. Here's a spot on the island that the sheep can get to. And as soon as we get them over here, they'll come in here and they'll eat all these heads down. They'll knock down the little bit that's left over here, and they won't allow this thick elephant grass forest to take over. All right, so up here, we're on the north side of our property that's kind of away from the creek area there. And now we have some trees up here, and you can see how dense and thick it is over here, where once again, it's unmanaged space of the land. And then over here, you've got the transition to where it's a managed space. And you've got this space where about from 0 to 4 feet off the ground, you have this clearing that's taking place. And the sheep are getting in there, and they're managing, or they're eating all of the plant structure that's at the base of there. And it's causing it to lift, and it's taking away the life source from those invasive species. So our big mature trees, they're able to stand here and change the temperature by 20, 30 degrees by getting into the shade here. But they're opening up all of this here so you can get under it. We can get at it, we can manage it, we can see the fence line, and we can get at our property and manage it. And the other thing they're allowing to happen is the understory here is they're gonna allow this to start growing up and developing its native plant life as far as its grasses and whatnot. So by having the sheep get in here and manage this land, then we can come in and we can start cutting stuff back and making our brush piles and getting them cleaned out. So we take our brush piles and we don't burn all of them like a lot of people do. We'll actually put them in key locations on the property to allow the wildlife to have some natural habitat to get into, so your birds and your ground squirrels and rabbits and stuff like that. So having those natural brush piles, here's a great example of one. It's got some bigger branches, some smaller branches, and it allows places for those animals to get into and have a habitat to thrive and to live. So the other area that I'm going to walk back to here is back in this low-lying area that has a lot of water because it's where our spring is located at. We've got the RPS pump out here that's moving some water out of this location and letting us use it, but it's also been opened up by the sheep. So they've gotten in here and they've cleaned back just mountains of elephant grass, and they've allowed this understory here, once again, the native grasses, to get in here and to start getting light and to become established. And it's just by repetitive grazing in different seasons over the last couple years. So getting the sheep back into here and letting them manage this, we're getting such a lush growth of grasses that are great for them to get in here and eat. Over here is another area that was super overgrown. We couldn't even walk through here without getting stuck in briars and stuff like that. They've gotten in there and they've cleaned it all up here. So the idea behind the sheep is that they get it to a place where things have started to die off that are they're of low value to us, and we can get in here and get it cleaned up, and then the grasses start to take over, and the canopy, the trees, still allow for that silvopasture, still allow for that, you know, windbreak or cooling for them to tuck back into. But it also then gets rid of the stuff that just is scrub and doesn't do anything and takes over the landscape. So for us, Katahdin Hair Sheep have they been a great asset for us. They've really changed the landscape. Do they come with no issues or no learning curve on our behalf? Absolutely not. We've had to learn a lot in managing them and rotating them. But as far as inputs into them, they've been super, super low. We haven't had to deworm them. We haven't had to give them supplemental feed outside of the winter months when we have to put hay onto them. And they've just been easy to manage. They mother out and they birth really well, and they give twins most of the time. They're way easier to handle for us because we don't have that heavy infrastructure and equipment. So when it comes to harvesting them and putting them up into the freezer, and you can check out some of our stuff on how we store the meat in a canning method so that we're not using freezer space for them as well. So that's something that Annie and I and the kids have done, to where we can store the meat and put away the grass-fed, 100% grass-fed, healthy, good meat that we can put up for the family. And we're only harvesting an animal that's like 150 pounds live weight, maybe a little bit more. But then in the freezer, they're giving us about 50 to 55 pounds of meat in the freezer for us to utilize. And so it's way easier to manage the size of an animal. And they're getting into places and managing parts of the property that machinery can't get into, and that even larger animals wouldn't get into and eat the types of species that they eat. A lot of people ask the question about why sheep versus goats. And I like sheep personally because they stay in the fences easier. They actually eat almost the same profile of plant species. The Katahdin hair sheep eat those just as well as the goats would eat. The only thing that they don't eat is right in front of me, and that's this guy right here, is the thistle. So the sheep don't like to eat the thistles, and I don't know of many animals that want to mess around with the thistles because they're mean things. So they eat the same profile of things for the most part. They'll get in and they'll get after it, and they will change your landscape. And they're easy to manage. They give you a great product at the end as far as either more babies that you can sell or utilize. They give you meat. So we've really enjoyed the Katahdin hair sheep, the product at the end of the day, how they manage the land, and how easy they've been to manage for us here at the property. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and check out the links that we've got for processing meat and canning it up on your property so that you don't have to take up so much freezer space. Have a blessed day.